Growing up, Jessica Hull wanted to be a reporter at the Washington Post. But now she's ended up with decades of experience in product, marketing, and sales, and is now the chief growth officer at the startup OpsCanvas, where she helps companies build smarter in the cloud. Jessica helps trace this very fascinating career journey for us, why she believes that the DC tech ecosystem is unique compared to other places like Silicon Valley, and also answers some rapid fire questions at the end, including what is the most transferable skill from being a certified ski instructor to a tech leader. Let's get going. Welcome back to DC Decoded, where we break down what happens when artificial intelligence meets the nation's capital. I'm your host, Sam Lee. Today, we have Jessica Hull with us. Jess is the Chief Growth Officer at OpsCanvas, where she helps companies build smarter in the cloud by aligning product, marketing, and sales. A TEDx speaker and co-author of The Product Mindset, Jess is known for her creativity, storytelling, and warm candor. She's led $800 million plus redesigns and has built high-performing global teams. Jess, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
All right. So you had mentioned in a recent video that as a kid, your dream was to be a journalist working at the Washington Post. So talk a bit about how we went from that idea to your current role at OpsCanvas, please.
Yeah, I think I always have a plan, but I never seem to quite follow it when it comes to my career. The dream when I was in high school doing journalism was to write for the Post. And then right after high school, I was working at the museum. It was this Museum of News, and we were in Arlington, Virginia at the time. And I got to work on a bunch of television shows with a bunch of the networks. And I thought that they were nuts, and I didn't want to do that.
Fair assessment.
So I'm glad I got that experience early on, but discovered that I'd always loved technology. I was always interested in making things, but discovered I could do graphic design. I could work on television shows. I could make exhibits. I could write like scripts and things to help some of our tools work better, and definitely felt like I found myself on a path of a creative plus technology field. So I'm pretty grateful for those early days to have so much freedom to try stuff and figure out where my interests were.
Got it. And I also know that you gave a TED Talk in October 2020 titled The Surprising Secrets of Exceptional Product Leaders. And you talked a lot about what a successful product leader looks like. I'm curious what actually goes into executing a TED Talk, especially in October 2020. Please elaborate for us.
That wasn't weird at all to do a TEDx in October 2020. So it's a lot of work. So it is a multi-month process of getting your abstract right, getting your overall messaging right, getting the whole talk ready. And you've rehearsed it a bunch of times.
Sure.
And I rehearsed it a bunch of times in our spare bedroom, walking around in heels.
Right.
I knew every word before I got there. So I think it is tremendous practice if you ever get the opportunity to really go from an idea to an 18-minute really comprehensive thing. But the hardest part of TEDx for me, and maybe it's different for other people, was really nailing that story. And I think we went through like 4 or 5 versions to really figure it out. And it was funny how it came together because we were just talking. And I was like, well, I know how to tell you if you're any good as a product leader in the first 5 minutes because you can tell me your story and I get it and let's go.
Right.
And she kind of looks at me and she's like, that's it, right? I'm like, what? She's like, that's your talk. That's it. And then the outline came 2 minutes. We end the call 2 minutes later on a whiteboard, like a little whiteboard that I kept at home.
Yeah.
Did out the outline, and that was it. But it took like 4 or 5 iterations. It took like lots of bad versions. And then I remember with that version that sort of worked, going downstairs where my husband was working and saying, how about this? And he's like, there you go.
Wow.
And it just all came together. But I can't think of a program that I've been through that was better at developing that skill set than TEDx.
Sure. Awesome. Yeah, well, there you go for any aspiring TEDx speakers out there. There's some advice. Let's talk about current day. What, for the people in the DC community who might not be aware of, what is OpsCanvas and what does your role as Chief Growth Officer entail?
So OpsCanvas was really founded to solve a pretty common problem. In a previous startup, our CTO and CEO, who are our founders, were constantly struggling with DevOps and managing their cloud. It was like one person who knew where everything is, who could get things working. It was really expensive. They weren't quite sure how things would work. They weren't quite sure if they were going to grow, that it was going to support them. And every once in a while, they got this really nasty surprise in the form of their cloud bill spiking. And so OpsCanvas started with the idea of, gosh, it's got to be easier. It's got to be. And they started looking around and talking to people because there's a million DevOps companies and all sorts of tools and all sorts of services companies, but no one has got it really figured out. And so OpsCanvas, our goal is really simple. We want to make building in the cloud fun. And the way we do that is we integrate into your CI/CD pipeline. We help you run your deployments, collect all the data about that deployments, and then we can say things like, here's how that's actually organized. Here's what's connected to what. Here's what's sitting idle. Here's the things that are exposing you to a lot of risk because you don't know what they are. And so we integrate super fast and give you a lot of visibility and control of your cloud. And so we call it a cloud orchestration platform because it kind of helps everything work together. And it gives you that confidence to know that you can grow and innovate as a business because you are on a firm foundation and you have a platform that can grow with you.
Right. And in your role, what does your day-to-day look like? What part of this startup are you mostly operating in?
Yeah, so I was fractional. Originally, I came in just to help, make some decisions on the roadmap. But then it was like, hey, we need a new sales deck. I'm like, oh, I can write sales. Hey, we need some help with this investor pitch. I'm like, oh, I can pitch investors. I've done that before. And then I started doing sales meetings and I started doing marketing collateral. And all of a sudden it was like, well, we need you to do product and go to market. And so it's both together. And the irony of this is not 6 months earlier, I had written something that was like the most popular thing I wrote in 2024 about how marketing and sales and product needed to be better integrated, and product wasn't listening, and product was throwing things over at the last minute, and campaigns were falling apart. So the universe decided to get back at me for having all these opinions about how this was supposed to work by, putting me in a position where I was now responsible for it, and I need to kind of figure out how it works.
Right. That is a funny way of the universe telling you what to do. And I'm curious, where geographically are the clients of OpsCanvas based? I'm sure it's kind of all over, but I'm curious, where geographically your clients usually are.
Geographically, we're based in Alexandria, Virginia. We are in Old Town, right next to the Torpedo Factory, if you know the area, which is a fantastic place to be. And we're in a co-working space called ALX. But clients are all over the place. We have some people who are working with us from all over the US and also folks in Europe. And, for the most part, we're focused on North America, small to medium-sized companies who are growing, but kind of hitting some growing pains are kind of our sweet spot. Enterprises, we may get there one day. And anybody who has a massive team and wants to build everything themselves, not really our customer, but also not a lot of them. So I think we're going to be all right.
Right. Let's shift to talking a bit about the DC tech ecosystem. So as we were discussing just before we hit recording, you spent most of your life in the DC, Maryland, Virginia region. What do you think is unique about the DC tech ecosystem now compared to other tech hubs we could think of in North America, specifically like Silicon Valley or New York?
Yeah, I grew up in Falls Church, Virginia, and I live in Falls Church, Virginia. So that particular part of my story is not that exciting. I originally wanted to work in museums because I came up working in museums and then found my way through lots of different things. I will say I do have a chip on my shoulder when everyone's like, the Valley is where everything's happening. It's all in California. I'm like, what? All I hear is that those people are expensive and entitled. So that is my
totally not DC. Expensive and entitled. No way. No way.
Like people who get things done, and we're So I think when I look at the DC technology scene, one is it's a little incestuous. that a lot of people know each other. And then there's a couple of dominant companies throughout that have provided, like AOL being an early one, where 10 years ago, you could just find an AOL person everywhere. So I think a couple companies really built an ecosystem where talent has been able to come up and thrive and spread and grow and connect. And it's a combination of, I think, the federal government and its investments in science and technology and infrastructure of things, and being able to have, internet hubs not that far away. And we also have a strong cybersecurity industry. We have a lot of hard science. Now, a lot of that is being threatened right now, which is awful. And I think very short-sighted in terms of not only our local economy, but the American economy as a whole. And so I think when you think about DC Tech, it is smaller and we're not swinging as big as maybe people out there in California, but I think you see a diversity of companies who are solving real problems, who don't shy away from big things, who have access to fantastic talent and knowledge within the government spaces, both domestically and internationally. And so I think that creates a lot of opportunity for really interesting companies to be incubated within the DMV.
Right. I'm curious because on this podcast, we've talked to a variety of people in the tech scene in DC, all the way from big business leaders to startup founders to policy people. And a common theme seemed to be that most of our guests have agreed that there seems to be like a moment now where there is a positive shift for DC tech, like startups are coming in, the cash flow is coming in. Would you agree with that statement? Do you feel like now, 2025, it seems to be a uniquely significant moment for the DC tech ecosystem to be growing? Or is it more so just like part of a more normal trend that people might be talking about?
Hard to say. I think if you think about it, there's a couple of companies who've come up in this area that have done, they're not maybe as big and as flashy, but there's been a lot of really strong, interesting companies. And the other thing we'll see is there'll be one company. Let's take OPower. So OPower startup that worked with the utilities to save money. And yeah, my husband worked there, so that's part of the reason I know about them. And so OPower was a great company, and then they eventually got acquired by, or they went public, got acquired by Oracle. Well, that talent pool dispersed across the region. And then you had Upside pop up. And then so now a couple of key players who are leaders at OPower are at Upside. And then I'm hearing that there's another interesting company from one of the co-founders of OPower that started another company. And you'll find, Three Pillar was a place where I came up with like 4 companies have spawned out of Three Pillar. And then you'll have a lot of AOL graduates, and then they went out, and that's how you got like Monument Sports and Entertainment and Bright Spot. And you get something like CoStar, where I used to work, which also started in DC, now based in Virginia, but it's publicly traded market cap north of $35 billion. So there's been a lot of interesting companies that have been able to grow through here. And every time one of those companies comes up, the top leaders and the second tier leaders, they go out and do interesting things. You saw the same thing with CEB. I worked for CEB. There's CEBers all over the DC tech scene who have a really strong grounding in strategy and operations, and a lot of, they're tough and they're smart and they don't take things super personally. So you just had a lot of these companies that have been able to incubate other leaders and incubate other companies. And maybe what we're seeing now is that that's happened so many times that there's a strong talent ecosystem here. And you've got this diversity of experience and access to some experts and some relationships you can't get other places. And that becomes fertile ground for innovation.
Yeah, I think on one point about innovation and just business efficiency, I see you've recently been talking about the concept of zombie resources and how they can drain a business budget and increase risk, and how companies like OpsCanvas can help you eliminate zombie resources. So can you explain a bit that and walk me through what exactly those are?
Yeah, if you think about it, everybody has a junk drawer. Somewhere in your house, there's probably a junk drawer. It's a collection of things. You kind of forgot about it. You have these great ideas that I'm going to organize it one day, but you never quite get around to it. So it's just always sitting over there and kind of a mess. while that describes some place in your kitchen, that also describes your cloud infrastructure. So you have teams and all of a sudden they need a service in order to launch an application. And they're not sure what they're able to use or what exists or what's accessible to them. So they end up standing something up that they don't really need. And then we have a duplicate where they set something up a while ago and they've forgotten about it and it's just sitting out there. And because it's sitting out there, one, you're paying for it. You're not getting any benefit from it. And two, it's a problem because it essentially expands the surface area of attack is what a lot of the cybersecurity people will talk about. It's over there and it's a weak point in your system that can be exploited because it's not necessarily getting patched and it's not necessarily being looked after. And so because we sit in your pipelines and we run all your deployments, we know what all of the resources that are being active. So when we compare that to what you have, we can very quickly identify, here's everything that you have that you're probably not using. You probably want to shut it down. And it's click, 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 done. Once we've identified it and you verified it, because we just want to make sure that we're not going to cause any trouble, then it's done. And the other thing is we introduce something called the lifecycle rule, which is if I'm going to spin up an environment because I want to do a test, that environment will stop running in just a few hours. So you don't have to remember where you put the thing. It'll actually, it's set on a timer and it can decommission itself. So it's kind of like the best way to stop zombies is to not let them get started.
Sure. Agreed with that. Honing in on the artificial intelligence work that you help businesses do, I'm curious from what you're hearing from clients, what are the most hopeful comments and also the most pessimistic comments about AI integration they have that they bring up with you in OpsCanvas?
Yeah, I did a couple of, so I did a period where I was fractional, and I've had loads of conversations with people about AI all over the place. Sure. It's not as good or as bad as anyone thinks it is. It's somewhere in the middle. So we definitely have people who are afraid of it, and they've kind of said to their staff, don't touch this. We don't want to be involved in this. We're very concerned about this. And they want to kind of just push it to the side because that feels a little bit more comfortable. And to them, what I would say is you're absolutely right. There are some serious risks here, risks about how your data is going to be used, risks about how the results that you're going to get and the type of biases or compliance issues it can overdo. You're not wrong to be worried. But you are wrong to put your head in the sand and think that this isn't going to change things. That you actually do need to understand what these things are and you do need to experiment with them because this is coming and this feels like the most transformative wave of my career. So I was kind of, I've been through the move to the cloud and I've been through mobile and not really social so much, but that kind of happened before I got into the workforce. But there's been and this one feels bigger than all of those. And so, and it feels like that just in the last few weeks, once Duolingo put out their notice about using AI, and now what we've seen, like 2 or 3 other companies also gotten on board. The thing about this is no good decision comes from a place of fear. If we are playing from fear and we are communicating and directing our teams from fear, that is not going to yield some really positive results. So what I think you need to say as an organization, as a leader, is to say, hey, y'all, this is here. And some of this is really going to help us inside our organization run more efficiently, help us outside of our organization serve our customers more effectively. We are going to try things. We are going to learn and we are going to figure this out. And it's going to be a bumpy road to a good place, but there's a lot of possibility here. And here's how we're going to get started. And here are the guardrails that are going to keep us in check. And here's how we're going to continue to learn and grow. And so some kind of program that says we're going to allow usage of LLMs, so copilots or ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, whatever. And here's the guardrails. Don't put any of our private data in it. You are responsible for the results or some of the things that I've heard. We are going to be looking at what use cases we think are going to be the most potentially valuable and doing some prototyping and experimentation around what those are. And over time, we're going to build up a competency in AI. We're going to establish some good guidelines about what responsible AI looks like and how we're going to develop it over time. But I think you really need to say, here's our strategy. Here's where we are. And here's how we're going to learn, because we don't expect that this is all going to work. But being afraid or pretending it's not coming and that there's nothing you can do about it, that's not good leadership. And that's not going to yield the kind of results that you need to be able to generate. And,
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. No, do you want to finish a thought? Or?
Oh, no, I was going to say, just so OpsCanvas, we're pretty small, right? We're a startup. So we are very AI forward.
Sure.
We use AI internally. We use it. We have an AI lead, and we're building a lot of AI-enabled features. We talked about zombies. We use it in visibility. We're eventually going to use it in things like security and compliance, but we also are going to help people build AI infrastructure in their cloud, because that can be really tricky. And so I think we've really leaned in and said, in this current economic environment where fundraising is hard, because I've been doing that and it's kind of tricky. And even when you do raise, it's not like go out and hire 100 people. Like that was a thing for a minute. That is not the thing now. It's like you need to go out and raise and then be really thoughtful about what hires you're going to make and be able to very quickly see a path from hiring these folks to, growth, whatever that growth looks like for you. So I think that's AI has a role to play in enabling smaller organizations to compete with a lot bigger people. I heard somebody, talking about some functionality like ours, and they had raised like 6 times as much as us. And I'm like,
oh,
but it's not 6 times better.
Right. It's not proportional there. I see. Yeah. I would say, based on at least my conversations with people like you and what you guys are telling me, is that most working professionals in the DC region can get on board with some sort of AI usage. Some obviously are using it way more than others. It's just based on the nature of work. But I think what a lot of people are thinking a lot about is, what does responsible AI look like, and how that affects their business or their team. So I recently talked with this other startup in DC called Trustable. I talked with their CTO and director of policy and product, and they're all about helping their clients deploy responsible AI governance software. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what is your definition of responsible AI, and how does that fit into the calculus of OpsCanvas and helping their clients grow with AI?
I was definitely going to mention Trustable.
Okay, awesome.
As a lead company in the area, and I've been to
they'll like that
talk with some of the Trustable people as they talk about responsible AI, and I would definitely, if you are interested in that, I would definitely give them a follow. And there are a lot of organizations. So one, I think it just starts with always trying to learn and identify like who, there's a lot of different organizations out there who are doing some really interesting things in responsibility. So continuing to learn would definitely be a piece. One I like when I think about this particularly, I guess there's a few different lenses to think about, which is, how is it helping me run the business? And then the part that I really tend to focus on is building AI products or building AI features. And the framework I'd like actually was not developed for responsible AI, but I think it kind of works, and it's called the trust triangle. And it's in a book from Francis Fry and Ann Morris. And they were the people who were called in to fix Uber when Uber had so many huge problems with their culture. And so they talk about this trust triangle, and it's 3 things. It's logic, empathy, and authenticity. So logic, that kind of makes sense, right? Which is, does this feel logically valid? Have you shown your work? Have you explained your process? Do these results make sense? Is there some sort of counterweight and explanation about it? Which is really being able to say, how did you get to this? And how much confidence and faith should I put into it? And what is the rationale? And what are the inputs? And how are you training the algorithm? Which is like, how do you think about this? Does that make sense? Does that seem reasonable and fair and valuable? So one is their logic sound? And have they explained that in a way that makes sense? And I think it's actually, a lot of people talk about explainable. I like to think about understandable, because just because you as a data scientist can explain what this is, does not mean that I as a person understand what that is. And now I can make a good decision.
Right.
But being able to help people understand things so they can decide what to do with this. Like, am I gonna follow these Google Maps directions with traffic? Okay, maybe that's less of a thing. Depending on the situation, you might really want them to, or, am I gonna make a financial decision? Am I gonna make a health decision? Is this gonna, change how I parent my children? And all those things are going to be different depending on how much you're asking someone to do. So is the logic sound? And where did this come from? And how did this get made? The next one is empathy, which is, do they care about me? Have they put the work in? Have they thought about a diversity of people and situations? Have they tested? I was always struck by something Kara Swisher said, was that so much of these social media sites were designed by people who never knew what it was like to be afraid, who never knew what it was like to walk down the street when it's dark at night and you hear someone behind you and you feel scared, or you feel targeted, or you feel exposed in a way that other people don't. And so I think the empathy piece, although I know empathy gets way overused, right? But like this sense of like, I am showing you that I care about you. I am showing you that I do the work and I listen and I take action. Am I believing that I am part of this community and I'm not separate from this community? And then the third one is authenticity, which is I am who I say I am. And so I'm showing up all these pieces. So I've been thinking a lot about that, as well as there's a lot of great ideas. Algorithm Justice League, I think, does some really interesting things, and a lot of different organizations. I wouldn't say that I'm an expert per se, but I think each organization needs to figure out some place to get started and then make a commitment to continuous learning and improvement.
Right. Well said. Well said. Ready for a rapid fire segment to close us out?
Okay.
All right. One to 1.5 sentences per response. Okay. So you are a certified ski instructor. So from ski instructor to tech leader, what's the most transferable skill?
I can talk to anybody and explain things that are complicated to them in easy to understand ways.
What is your most used app on your phone?
Google Keep. Because I walk around sometimes and I get ideas and then I use text to speech to get it down. Or that's where I'm like, oh, where was I supposed to go? Oh, wait, what's the code to this thing? So that's how I outsource my memory.
Great. Plug for Google Keep. Worst career advice you've ever received?
Oh, that's hard because I really, I mostly gotten good career advice.
It's a good problem. It's a good problem.
I'm trying to think. Well, to be honest, like I got nothing because if it was bad, I guess I don't listen to it.
Yeah, you don't listen to it. It's out.
I'm pretty good at not hearing things sometimes, which is hilarious.
Good. Okay.
That's what my children do to me.
Cycle repeats itself. Favorite spot to eat in Nova or Northern Virginia for people who might not know?
Difficult challenge. Okay, recent one that I loved, and it was called Doru. It's an Indian restaurant in like Northeast. That was amazing. But favorite like Falls Church spot, Ellie Bird is just.
I have not been yet, but I've heard great things.
It's like the chef has a Vietnamese and French cooking background.
Right.
It's a beautiful space. The food's fantastic. Excellent service. But there's a ton of places. Amazing. When I go to other places, I always say how good the food is in the DC area and that the best food is in the suburbs.
Yes, 100% agree. Yes. One book every product leader should read besides yours.
As I look over here, I would say Build, the Tony Fadell book.
Okay.
I thought there's a lot of good ideas in there.
Okay, good to know. And then most valuable lesson from getting a master's at Edinburgh.
Living in the UK is super fun. No.
In what way? You have to say a bit more.
Well, the one that has stuck with me forever is when I was in graduate school for design. I remember reading this paper, and it's an interview with Donald Schoen. And he was this kind of legendary educator of designers. And he said this our job as design educators and design leaders is to help designers develop an internal gyroscope, an internal sense of direction towards what is good and what is valuable. And that has never left me ever since. And as someone who kind of has navigated a lot of leadership roles, and every time, the first time, I was the first whatever at that company. I've never had a leadership role when anybody had the job before me. But I come back to this idea of my job as a senior product design and now commercial leader is, how do I help someone develop that good internal sense of judgment? And that's my biggest fear of AI and things that I worry about, because I got to develop that by making things with my hands and making lots of mistakes and having to make 20 posters and then having to, make a bunch of keyframe animations and figure out keyframes and all that. I had to make posters. I had to make websites. I had to make mobile. So many things I put my hands on, and a more senior designer or creative leader guided me through learning how to do things. And that's what I started to have a judgment and a sense of what's good or bad, and to be able to conceptualize and have a deeper thinking of what the craft of design is, that it wasn't just putting my hands on something and making things, but I was able to do the thinking part through that. And my worry so much as I look at the industry is that we don't need it as much if AI can do it. So how are we going to teach judgment? How are we going to define and grow an aesthetic or an understanding of what good is and what is meaningful and useful and not just buzzy and cool, when you're not having to, how do we teach that? Like that's like my big thing that I'm trying to figure out.
Sure.
Because people who are starting today are going to enter a world that looks nothing like the one that I did forever ago. And not to say that anyone can have my career. I don't know if anybody wants to have my career, but they definitely can't have it, because it's a product. Like so much of it was like, when was I born? When did I graduate from college? What was you? Right. There was nothing. Product management, not a thing. UX designer, not a thing. Product designer, not a thing. Product manager, no. All this crap was like didn't exist, and we just started doing it. And I didn't have a heck of a lot of competition, because it's not like there was anybody who knew what the hell it was for most of it.
Sure.
And now it's like, desirable and people want to get into it. But so I would have never made the cut if I had started like 10 years later.
Right. Well said, and definitely fodder for a sequel, I'm sure, at some point in this conversation. But for now, Jess, thank you so much for your time. I think we covered a lot of ground, as we tend to do on these episodes more and more. And yeah, I'm sure me and all the listeners will really, really appreciate the insights. And just thank you again for coming on DC Decoded.
Thanks, Sam. I really appreciate it.
That's a wrap for this episode of DC Decoded. I want to thank Jess again for her time. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe to DC Decoded on your favorite podcast platform, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. If you found this discussion valuable, we'd love it if you left a rating or review. If you're watching or listening on Substack, consider recommending us. It's free and really helps others find us. For more on the DC chapter of the Gen AI Collective, upcoming events, and ways to get involved via collaborations or sponsorships, check out the links in the show description. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in 2 Wednesdays for the next episode.